Well, we are always thrilled to welcome in a guest in studio on our Feature Friday segment on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Ron Freeman is here. You may know him from his multi-decade career in Kansas City after his playing days with the Chiefs. And what, 87, Ron? You were with the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, it's just a few years ago.
Yeah, a year before I was born, but I won't tell you that. So you've got a new book out, and we'll get to that coming up. But for people that maybe don't know you, your background, you're a Missouri kid. You go to Pittsburgh State. You're an All-American there. You play in the NFL, and then you decide Kansas City is going to be home for you. And you've done a lot of things during that time in Kansas City, media-related, chaplain for the Chiefs and the Royals. So what has your career been like in a nutshell since your playing days?
Well, since my playing days, I started out urban representative with FCA, worked in inner city ministry here for about 7 years. Then got involved with politics a little bit here in Kansas City with the Republican Party. I was a candidate for Congress a couple of times. And then got into motivational speaking and leadership consulting, worked a couple of small businesses. And then actually when Josh went pro with the NFL, I got registered as an agent with NFLPA and helped him out with a group of guys. But so I've done a lot of things. My younger son kind of summed it up. He goes, I asked him when he was a junior in high school, I said, what are you going to pursue in college? And he goes, well, Dad, thought about it. He goes, I think maybe pre-med or pre-law. Or I can get a P degree and do whatever, like you, and do whatever the heck I want. So that's kind of how it rolls.
Oh, that's funny. So, and you were, and for people that don't know, your son, obviously, Josh Freeman, played at Kansas State, played in the NFL for how many years?
6 years total.
Okay, 6 years total in the NFL. He's now down in Tampa where he played with the Bucs, right? That's where he's spending most of his time now?
Plays a lot of tennis, enjoys it.
So how did he take up tennis? Was he a tennis kid?
No, not really. He just is something he likes to do. He likes to compete, so he's playing competitively and just enjoying himself. It's just kind of funny, one of those coincidences. He played with someone a couple of times, like, this is fun, and went after it. Turns out he's pretty good at it.
As someone who tried to get is in the golf, but stinks at it, tennis would have been the better way to go for me, too. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, I know that golf game, buddy.
Oh, man, it's tough. So, you and I spoke. Your book is called Rethinking Race. It's better than we have been led to believe. Your background, black man born during the Jim Crow era, in a part of Missouri that was a Confederate stronghold.
Yes.
How did your childhood go, and how did that bring you to this book, Rethinking Race, which people can get on Amazon?
Well, it's a great question. I know I was growing up as a young boy, I wanted to be a Black Panther because I felt like we could overcome by virtue of, the Malcolm X mindset of whatever means necessary. Was kind of the mentality, and I was very young. I was in the 7th grade, and a white kid named Charlie Wolf invited me to come to his house. And I'd never been to a white person's house before, and I said yes. And he goes, well, I got to tell you, my dad was in World War II. He led a battalion of black soldiers into combat, and they abandoned him. And he hasn't spoken to a black person since. I'm like, wait a minute, why are you asking me to your house?
Yeah.
And but I go to his house and really sit down with him and his family, mom and dad. Met his older brother, nicest people in the world. Dad actually pulled me aside and said, hey, you're always welcome here. Even if Charlie's not home, if you're passing by, feel free to stop for a glass of water, whatever. It's just really very gracious. And we became lifelong friends. Charlie and I are still friends to this day. But that was significant. About 6 months later, I didn't grow up in a church-going family. But one night I heard the gospel on TV on a Thursday night. I remember that one. And decided to go to church the following Sunday. And so I go to church.
By yourself?
By myself. Got up.
So you're what,
dressed,
7th, 8th grade?
7th grader, yeah.
What do you tell your parents?
I was going to church.
Yeah,
so,
and they said,
all good.
Enjoy?
Yeah. And so I go to church. I sit down in the pew, and I don't remember a thing the pastor said, but there were 2 women in front of me that were talking about me. One of them said, you don't belong here, or he doesn't belong here. The other one said he shouldn't be here.
This was a white church?
No, it was a black church.
Really?
So it was mind-blowing. But I walk out of there, it's like, okay, I guess I don't belong there. Now, to a 13-year-old boy, I was rejected by the whole church in that moment. But as a grown-up, it was 2 women talking. I get that now. But then it was eye-opening. Really, it was a huge paradigm shift because all of a sudden I've got this wanted to be a Black Panther to white family's really nice to me, black church rejects me. And so that changed my shape. I began to realize that Dr. King's idea of you don't judge people by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. and that became just a way of life. And all of a sudden, I didn't have the animus, didn't have the idea that I had to beat somebody up to make my way through life. So it was just really a different story and transition for me at that point in time.
Now, was that embraced by your parents and your family, or was this a unique idea in your circle?
It was a unique idea and it was very internal. You know, I didn't go around telling anybody everything. It's just this is the way I saw the world was different at that point in time. And it was kind of interesting because my freshman year, we had a race riot in high school.
Really?
And I remember consciously saying, I'm not going to participate. I don't see a reason to do this. And it was stupid stuff, but I did throw one punch because the guy hit my sister, but that's more self-defense of a sister. Exactly,
Yeah. So it was, so wow. Okay. So then where for you as you know, you go through and you're putting together this book, Rethinking Race, what led you to want to write this book at this moment in American history? Well,
that's a great question. I tell you, there was I was working with Lee Summit Schools. I was a consultant to the superintendent and his leadership team really from 2016 until 2020.
Okay.
And the first 3 years, there's a guy named David McGee. He was superintendent. And then he left, and they brought in a guy named Dennis Carpenter, who happened to be a black guy. And we were working together for about 5 or 6 months. And he says, hey, can we meet out of town? I want to talk to you about something.
This is the Dennis Carpenter who kind of left in shame and got a huge settlement to, get shown the door. So that Dennis Carpenter.
Okay. Exactly. So we meet out of town, and he goes, which I thought was a weird request, but he goes, in our meeting, he goes, can your training prove that Lee Summit's racist? And I said, no, I'm a leadership consultant. And number two, I don't really agree with the premise that Lee Summit's racist. I'd lived there in Lee Summit for about 5 years at that time and had not had any kind of interaction that would be deemed racist. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know where he was coming from. But the very next week, there's a headline in the Kansas City Star after he terminated me because that was the end of our working relationship.
So once you said, I can't prove that Lee Summit schools are racist, he kicked you to the curb.
You're done, yeah. And but the next week was the Kansas City Star headline, superintendent says Lee Summit's racist. Well, he didn't want me to prove it. He wanted me to back him up when he came out with that statement. And I did just the opposite, got involved with a group called the Community Solutions Focus Group in Lee Summit, and we basically opposed him and stood up to him in every corner. I remember being at a school board meeting and asking him a pointed question. I said, you talk about coming to Lee Summit to dismantle racism in our schools. Give me some examples of racism in the school district. And the response was, well, we haven't found it yet. It's like, come on, man.
So you're looking for it.
Yeah, exactly. You're on a witch hunt, but you're accusing in public.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so that was an inspiration behind getting this book written and getting it communicated, because I really believe that our country it's not racist. We have racist people here because that's everywhere in the world.
Of course.
But we've done an amazing thing, and it's kind of funny going through a book and writing it, how you start with an idea, but you end up with something that's more clear, what you're thinking. And here's what it came down to at the end of the book was, our founders understood this, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And that was a vision statement they put out there. They weren't living it, and they knew it, because the phrase from the preamble to the Constitution was, in order to form a more perfect union. They knew there was something more to lay hold of, and they set a framework for us to move into it. And if you look from 1776 to 2025, there's been a remarkable progress in that direction. We have formed a more perfect union, and we've had an incredible world and society. But there's some remarkable things in our history that a lot of times we overlook, and that's why I think we need to rethink race in our country.
But, it's fair to say that dividing Americans based on race is big business in America right now.
It
right?
is. Absolutely. It's
a lot of money to be made.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that you've had this, and I talk about this in the book, Pete. There's you can go from the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, when we had real oppression. We had Jim Crow laws. We had the black codes. Life for a black man was hard. You didn't have many opportunities. Just wasn't there because society pushed you out. The Civil Rights Act changed that. Now, critical race theory was actually generated during Jim Crow, and honestly, and with Jim Crow, it was a very accurate assessment. Mm-hmm. It was very accurate in terms of the oppression and limitations for a black person in American society. But we abolished that in 1964, and since that time, we started moving forward as a nation, and we have moved remarkably forward. But there was an undercurrent, and it was a Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, woe to me, a black man, I'm a victim of society, and the white man owes me something. And we became victims. Instead of people looking to succeed, we're looking for people to do something to make things right. And one of the things that I see in the whole dichotomy of race relations is when you have a framework where, as a black man, I am deemed a victim simply by the color of my skin, and you, as a white man, are deemed an oppressor simply by the color of your skin. Where do we go from there? It's an unsolvable problem, but we got people getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to come and tell you that you're a racist.
Yes.
Why?
It's unsolvable, and that's the beauty of the grift. The beauty of the grift is that if it stays unsolvable, there's always money to make.
Yes.
And that's the horrible beauty of it, but it is the beauty of it from that perspective. Ron Freeman is here. His book, Rethinking Race, it's better than we have been led to believe. It is available right now on Amazon. It just came out here in the last couple of months. You can find it on Amazon, Rethinking Race. Ron Freeman is here on KCMO Talk Radio, former player here with the Chiefs. He spent a lot of time, 35 years in this town, media, running for Congress, and now this new book is out. We're going to take a break and come back with Ron Freeman next on 95.7 FM KCMO.
From the nation's heartland, it's Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Well, just some breaking news as we continue our conversation with Ron Freeman. The U.S. TikTok ban has been upheld. It will go into effect in 2 days on Sunday, January 19th. Now, Ron Freeman is here for our Feature Friday segment on KCMO. His new book is out and available, Rethinking Race. It's better than we have been led to believe. Former professional football player, All-American at Pitt State, spent time here with the Chiefs, and 35 years in Kansas City, doing a variety of jobs, some media stuff as well, TV, radio, running for Congress, the whole deal. So this book, Ron, I know there was a moment in your life 2 summers ago when you ended up on a plane with a woman who told you America was racist.
Yes.
A white woman, I will add,
to
a black man.
75-year-old white woman, yes.
And how did that impact you writing this book and wanting to make sure that, you got this book out there?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I was in the process of writing the book at the time, and I told her the title, and that's when she said, America is racist. And I just asked her, I said, well, why do you say that? And she pauses. She literally closes her eyes. She's thinking. She tilts her head and puts her finger on her temple. Then she looks up and she goes, I guess I never really thought about it. So for the next hour and a half, we talk about some of the ideas of racism and how far we've come as a nation, because she's 75, so she knows what it was like under Jim Crow. And you talk about the progress. I mean, this is really crazy. Another situation, I was talking with a friend of mine, white female, about 50 years old, and we were sitting having coffee in a public place in Lee Summit. It was during the George Floyd chaos. And she goes, hey, do you think America's more racist now than it was in the 1960s? And I said, no way. First of all, I was surprised she even asked.
Yeah.
Because in 1960, if me, a black man, and her, a white woman, were sitting in a public place having a conversation, laughing, enjoying each other's company.
Oh, yeah.
She sent home to her room to figure out what she did wrong, and I'm taken out to the nearest tree, beaten and hung, whatever, without any recourse. It's just, it was a different era in time. And the people think that racism is bad because that's what they hear from TV. That's what they've been told. I was speaking to a group at a community college in western Kansas, a group of college students, and talking about this rethinking race concept, and I asked them how things were for them on their campus. And they were all like, great. People love us. We're respected. We don't have any trouble. It's like, awesome. And then one of the kids goes, yeah, but when you turn on the TV, you hear a different story. And the reality is that TV presents what it wants you to think, not what actually is. And George Floyd is a perfect example of that, but I don't want to get into that right now. But you had this whole worldview that the media, the left-driven media, forces on us that somehow America is racist, and people just accept it, not because they can prove it, they just hear it so frequently. And Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, was famous for saying, if you repeat a lie often enough, people will accept it as truth. Well, for decades, we allowed people to say that whites were racist, America was racist, and nobody ever stood up for America until this guy in the White House right now, or going to be inaugurated on Monday. He stood up. He didn't take the nonsense. And guess what? People started following him. I think that's why you started to see him make a penetration into the black vote, because he didn't cower in the corner and act like he was guilty of something when they said he was racist. He said, no, I'm not.
What's interesting is you've seen a shift in this last election of more so younger black men and younger Latino men than those maybe your age and up. Mm-hmm. And, that's probably driven in large part by life experiences. But where do you think, you ran for Congress as a Republican. Where do you think the party goes in growing this Big Ten party that is also a more diverse party and brings black, more likely to be men, we're seeing that right now, but also maybe women into the party? What does that look like? How do they build on this momentum they have?
Well, it's really simple, but yet challenging. And it's real old adage. I believe very strongly, if you want to succeed at anything, find someone who does it at a high level and then imitate the way they did it. Mm-hmm. And if the Republican Party wants to maintain this momentum and continue in the future on this path, be like Donald Trump. He's not a typical Republican. He's not a typical politician. He's a free thinker. He's a business-minded individual who has worked with people all over the world. He's you look at his approach, and I don't know if you're aware, when Mike Tyson got out of prison. Okay, he was a wreck. Mm-hmm. He's a mess. Donald Trump loaned the guy. Well, actually, he didn't even loan it. Gave him $10 million to help him get started again. There are time and time, and you hear stories about Donald Trump and this black person. And Michael Jackson, he was a big help to Michael Jackson. He was going through some very difficult times. It's like he didn't do that for politics. He's just a genuinely good person. Now, does he have rough edges? Is he a little brash? Yeah. Is he somewhat reactionary? Yes. Mm-hmm. But the guy is brilliant, and he's compassionate. And he's tireless. It's just phenomenal, and people want to follow him.
But to that point, Trump is such a unique figure in American history. I don't know how you genuinely duplicate it. And that's the part I wonder, if it's a Trump phenomenon or if there's a way for the party at large to build on it beyond Trump himself.
Yeah. Well, J.D. Vance had front row seat for really a discipleship model, a relationship where I'm watching how you do this, how you work and interact. And, he needs some help. He may have to surround himself with guys like Elon Musk and Vivek. Excuse me. Those guys are going to be around for a little while. Learn from those guys. Learn to think like they think. Learn to see how they see, and then take on the world and use that as a resource when you go forward afterwards.
Last night I was at an event, and someone asked me. They said, "Hey, how do we as Republicans penetrate urban cores that still just vote 90-10 or 80-20 blue over red?" They said, Trump's making some inroads, but what can we do on the local level? What would you say to those people to try to penetrate that and build on some of this national momentum as well? And as well as anybody being here in Jackson County for all these years.
Yeah, I think it's be genuine, be real. You know what? And because I guarantee you there are black voters all over this city who, if you just show up in an election year and talk to me in an election year, I'm not impressed. But if I see you, and that's why Trump's credibility is so strong, is that he was there before he ever ran for office. Yeah. He showed presence, he engaged, he communicated, he was a part of something. Okay, so at the end of the day, don't just talk and don't just show up when it's political, but actually engage in a process and help people. And here's the other thing, and this is the part where it gets challenging, is when you're labeled racist, don't run away and hide. Stand up and say, no, I'm not. And have the courage to say, you know what, let's talk about that. Because that's really my goal with this book, is that how do we create a conversation? Because if two people will communicate and talk, guess what? We'll find out we got more in common than we have in different. And maybe I judged you too harshly being when I called you a racist, and we can do better if we step back and take a couple of deep breaths.
Ron Freeman's here. His book on Amazon, Rethinking Race. You've got to find it. And we've got some people texting in saying, how do we share the interview? Well, it'll be up on our podcast, Apple, Spotify, after the show, as always. So Monday, of course, is MLK Day, Ron, and I thought this conversation would be appropriate with that coming up here in a couple of days. And you started off the conversation by judging a man based on his character and not his race. How do you hope the legacy of MLK weaves into this book and what you want to make sure people know about it?
A great question. Again, I actually there's in one chapter, the entirety of the I Have a Dream speech is in that chapter of the book.
That's great.
And I want people to take a look at that at that speech, because everything he dreamt about, we have accomplished. Mm-hmm. Nobody talks about that. And to me, that's where, the reality for America is that as a nation, we've taken on our challenges and we've overcome a lot. And we sit here and pretend like, it's worse now than it was 60 years ago. You're out of your mind. Okay. The reality is that we've made great progress. We interact at a level where the rest of the world. I heard this said recently, Pete. And this is something that it really impressed me. Is that when we compare American race to a utopian model that no one's ever lived, we look bad. But when you compare us to the rest of the world, we're getting it right. We're doing very well.
Well, Ron Freeman, looking forward to reading the book. I hope people go right now and buy it on Amazon, Rethinking Race. And we've also got an email we'll share here, rethinkraceusa@gmail.com. Best of luck with the book, Ron. Thanks for coming into the studio.
Thank you, Pete. Enjoyed being with you.
You bet. Excellent work there by Ron Freeman, part of our Feature Friday segment on KCMO Talk Radio.